The dinner rush at Romano's Italian restaurant was in full swing when Maya Torres balanced 3 plates of steaming pasta on her left arm and 2 glasses of wine in her right hand. The Friday evening crowd filled every booth and table, their chatter mixing with the soft jazz playing overhead. She had been working at this upscale restaurant for 8 months now, ever since she fled from Chicago to start fresh in New York City. The tips were good. The manager was kind, and most importantly, nobody here knew about her past. Maya weaved between tables with practiced ease, her dark ponytail swinging as she delivered orders with a warm smile. She had become good at pretending everything was fine, at acting like she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder. The nightmares had finally started to fade, and some nights she could actually sleep without jolting awake in fear. She was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally escaped. She approached table 12 near the large front windows, ready to take their dessert order. When she glanced up at the entrance, her heart stopped. The tray slipped from her hands before she could even process what was happening. The crash of breaking plates and glasses echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Marinara sauce splattered across the polished wooden floor. Wine spread in a dark red pool that looked disturbingly like blood, but Maya barely noticed. Her eyes were locked on the man standing in the doorway. Derek Mitchell. Her ex-boyfriend, her stalker. The reason she had fled Chicago in the middle of the night 6 months ago with nothing but a suitcase and her last paycheck. He looked exactly the same. Sandy blonde hair styled perfectly. Designer suit that probably cost more than she made in a month, and that smile. That cold, possessive smile that used to make her skin crawl. He was scanning the restaurant and she knew he was looking for her. Somehow, impossibly, he had found her. Maya's hands started shaking. Her breath came in short gasps. Other waitresses rushed over to help clean up the mess, but their voices sounded distant and muffled, like she was underwater. The restaurant manager, Mr. Chen, hurried over with concern written across his face, asking if she was okay. But Maya couldn't form words. All she could do was stare at Derek as his eyes swept across the room. Then their eyes met. Derek's smile widened into something triumphant and terrifying. He started walking toward her, moving between tables with deliberate slowness like a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Maya took a step backward, her shoe sliding in the spilled sauce, and she nearly fell. Her co-worker Jenna grabbed her arm to steady her, asking what was wrong, but Maya couldn't explain. How could she make anyone understand the months of relentless calls and texts? The way he would show up at her apartment at 3 a.m, the threats he made when she tried to break up with him, the restraining order that he violated 17 times before she finally gave up and ran. The other diners had started to notice the commotion. Conversations quieted. People turned to look. Derek was only 3 tables away now, still wearing that horrible smile, his hand reaching out toward her. Maya's back hit the wall. She was trapped, just like always. The exit was on the other side of the restaurant, and Derek stood between her and freedom. Just as Derek opened his mouth to speak, a deep voice cut through the tension like a blade. The voice came from the corner booth, the one that always stayed reserved. The one where the serious-looking man in expensive suits always sat alone on Friday nights. The man who spoke was tall, probably 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, giving him a distinguished look that suggested he was in his early 40s. But it was his eyes that caught attention, dark, intense, and currently fixed on Derek with an expression that could freeze fire. He stood from his booth with fluid grace, his presence somehow commanding the entire room despite the quiet way he moved. Maya had served him dozens of times over the past months. He always ordered the same thing, always left a generous tip, and always treated her with polite respect. She knew his name from his reservation, Dante Romano. She had assumed he might be related to the restaurant's original owners, though the current owner was Mr. Chen, who had bought the place 5 years ago but kept the name. Dante walked toward them, his expensive leather shoes barely making a sound on the floor. The entire restaurant had gone silent now. Even Derek had stopped moving, his confident smile faltering slightly as the stranger approached. There was something about the way Dante moved, the way other diners seemed to instinctively lean away from him, that suggested he was not someone to be trifled with. Derek recovered quickly, puffing up his chest. He was used to being the most important person in any room, used to people backing down when he threw around his family's money and connections. He had no idea who this stranger was, and clearly he didn't care. Big mistake. Dante stopped directly between Maya and Derek, creating a wall with his body. Up close, Maya could see the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the expensive watch on his wrist, and the cold calculation in his dark eyes as he assessed Derek. When Dante spoke again, his voice was calm, almost conversational, but something in his tone made the hair on the back of Maya's neck stand up. Derek made the mistake of trying to push past Dante, reaching for Maya's arm. He never made contact. Dante's hand shot out, catching Derek's wrist in a grip that made the younger man wince. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dante leaned in close to Derek and said something too quiet for anyone else to hear. Whatever he said made all the color drain from Derek's face. Derek tried to pull his arm free, but Dante held firm for another moment before releasing him with a slight push that sent Derek stumbling back a step. The smug confidence that Derek always wore like armor had cracked. He looked between Dante and Maya, his jaw clenching, clearly wanting to reassert control but suddenly unsure how to proceed. Dante turned slightly, his eyes meeting Maya's. She was still pressed against the wall, trembling, her white shirt stained with marinara sauce, her eyes wide with fear. But in Dante's gaze she saw something unexpected, not pity but understanding, like he knew exactly what kind of fear she was feeling. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than before, though still carrying that undertone of absolute authority. Maya's mind was racing. She didn't know this man, not really. But she knew Derek, knew what he was capable of, knew that once he got her alone, he would never let her go again. She had already tried the police, tried the legal system, tried everything that was supposed to work. None of it had stopped him. Maybe this stranger, whoever he really was, could do what the law couldn't. Outside, Maya could see Dante's car. It was a black luxury sedan with tinted windows, the kind that probably cost more than she would make in 5 years. A driver stood beside it, a large man in a dark suit who looked more like a bodyguard than a chauffeur. As Maya stood frozen with indecision, Derek recovered some of his bravado and took a step toward her again, his face twisting with anger at being challenged. That decided it. Maya pushed off the wall and walked toward Dante, her legs shaky but her decision made. She had survived this long by trusting her instincts, and right now, every instinct told her that whatever danger Dante Romano might represent, it was nothing compared to the certain hell that awaited her if she stayed here with Derek. Dante's hand rested lightly on her elbow as he guided her toward the door, his body still positioned protectively between her and Derek. As they reached the entrance, Derek shouted something, his voice cracking with rage, but Dante didn't even turn around. He simply raised one hand in a subtle gesture, and 2 men in suits who had been sitting at separate tables throughout the restaurant stood up and moved to block Derek's path. Maya realized with a start that they must have been Dante's people all along, watching over him even as he dined alone. The November air was cold against her face as Dante led her to the car. The driver opened the back door without a word. Maya hesitated for just a moment, looking back at the restaurant, at the life she had carefully built over the past 8 months. Through the window, she could see Derek arguing with Dante's men, see her co-workers staring in confusion, see Mr. Chen on the phone, probably calling the police. Then Dante spoke again, his voice quiet enough that only she could hear. He told her that she didn't have to be afraid anymore, that he would take care of this, that Derek would never bother her again. There was such absolute certainty in his voice that Maya found herself believing him, even though she had no logical reason to trust a stranger. She got into the car. The leather seats were soft and expensive, the kind that probably came from some exotic animal Maya couldn't even name. Dante slid in beside her, and the driver closed the door with a solid thunk that made her feel suddenly sealed off from the world she knew. The interior smelled like leather and subtle cologne, and the tinted windows turned the bright restaurant lights into soft, distant glows. Maya pressed herself against the far door, her heart still hammering in her chest. Now that the immediate danger had passed, the reality of what she had just done started to sink in. She had gotten into a stranger's car, a stranger who commanded enough respect or fear that grown men jumped to obey his gestures, a stranger whose very presence had made her stalker back down for the first time in 2 years. What did that say about who Dante Romano really was? Dante must have sensed her tension because he didn't move closer. He stayed on his side of the spacious back seat, giving her space, his hands resting calmly on his knees. He told the driver to take them to his office, his voice carrying easy authority, The car pulled smoothly into traffic, leaving Romano's restaurant behind. Maya watched through the back window as Derek burst out of the entrance, looking wildly up and down the street, but they were already a block away. Maya's voice came out shakier than she wanted when she finally spoke. She asked him who he was, really. Not his name, because she already knew that from serving him dozens of Friday night dinners. But who he was that made dangerous men back down with just a look. Dante was quiet for a moment, watching the city lights slide past the windows. When he answered, his voice was measured, careful. He told her he was a businessman, which wasn't technically a lie, just incomplete. He owned several legitimate enterprises throughout the city. Restaurants, construction companies, import-export businesses. But Maya wasn't stupid. She had lived in big cities long enough to recognize the signs. The way his men materialized from nowhere, the reserved booth that stayed empty until he arrived. The deference people showed him. The expensive everything. She asked him directly if he was in the Mafia. The word hung in the air between them. Dante turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Not anger at her boldness, but something like respect. He told her that people called him a lot of things, and what mattered was whether she felt safer now than she did 10 minutes ago. It was an answer without being an answer, but Maya understood. Yes, she felt safer, terrifyingly safer, because while she had been running from one dangerous man, she had just put herself in the hands of another who was probably far more dangerous. The difference was that Derek's danger was personal, obsessive, directed at possessing her. Dante's danger seemed more professional, controlled. But was that really better? The car pulled up to a high-rise building in Manhattan's financial district. It was all glass and steel, gleaming even in the night. The driver opened the door and Dante stepped out, waiting for Maya. She hesitated again. This was it. She could refuse to get out, ask to be taken home, try to go back to her normal life and hope that Derek would disappear again, except she knew he wouldn't. He had found her once, he would find her again. And next time there might not be a mysterious stranger to intervene. Maya stepped out of the car. Her shoes were still sticky with marinara sauce, her white shirt was ruined, and she was following a man who might be a mafia boss into an office building at 9 o'clock on a Friday night. If someone had told her this morning that this was how her day would end, she would have laughed. They took a private elevator that required a key card. It was just the two of them in the small space, and Maya became acutely aware of how tall Dante was. How he seemed to fill the elevator with his presence even though he stood perfectly still. She could see his reflection in the polished steel doors. He was watching her, but not in the way Derek watched her. There was no hunger in his gaze, no possessiveness, just careful observation like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the Manhattan skyline, the lights of the city spreading out like scattered diamonds. The office itself was elegant but understated. Dark wood, leather chairs, bookshelves lined with what looked like actual books rather than decorator pieces. A large desk sat near the windows, and there was a sitting area with a sofa and chairs near a bar cart that held expensive liquor in crystal decanters. Dante gestured for her to sit on the sofa, then moved to the bar. He asked if she wanted a drink, something to calm her nerves. Maya surprised herself by saying yes. She wasn't much of a drinker, but right now the idea of something to stop her hands from shaking seemed appealing. He poured her a small amount of amber liquid into a crystal glass, then poured one for himself. The liquor burned going down, but in a good way, warming her from the inside. Dante sat in the chair across from her, not on the sofa beside her, maintaining that careful distance. He asked her to tell him about Derek, everything, how they met, when it went wrong, why she was running. Maya didn't want to talk about it. She had spent 6 months trying to forget, trying to build a life where Derek Mitchell didn't exist. But something about Dante's steady gaze, the genuine attention he was paying, made the words start flowing. She told him how she met Derek at a charity gala in Chicago, where she had been working as a server. He was charming at first, generous, attentive. From a wealthy family with connections throughout the city. They dated for 4 months before she saw his other side. The jealousy started small. Questions about male coworkers. Requests to see her phone. Showing up at her apartment unannounced. Then it escalated. He accused her of cheating when she had lunch with her brother. He grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises when she tried to leave a party without him. He hacked into her email and read her private messages. When she finally broke up with him, he lost his mind. The stalking began immediately. 50 calls a day, texts threatening suicide if she didn't come back. He keyed her car. He sent flowers to her work every day with cards that said things like, "You'll always be mine and you can't escape me." He befriended her neighbors to find out her schedule. He somehow got copies of her keys and let himself into her apartment while she was at work, moving things around so she would know he had been there. She got a restraining order. Derek violated it the same day, showing up at her apartment with wine and flowers, acting like the order was just a misunderstanding. She called the police 17 times over 3 months. Derek's family had money and lawyers. He spent a night in jail twice, paid his fines, and came right back. The police started treating her like she was wasting their time, like she was being dramatic. One officer even suggested maybe she should consider moving if she was really that scared, so she did. She quit her job, left her apartment in the middle of the night, drove to New York, and started over. She thought she was safe. She thought 6 months was long enough, that Derek would have moved on, that the distance would be enough. She was wrong. When Maya finished talking, she realized there were tears on her cheeks. She wiped them away angrily, embarrassed to be crying in front of this man she barely knew, but Dante's expression hadn't changed. He wasn't looking at her with pity or judgment. He was looking at her like she had just given him information, data he was processing and analyzing. He asked her a question that surprised her. He wanted to know if Derek had family money or if he made his own. Maya blinked, confused by the question. She told him Derek's father owned a chain of car dealerships throughout Illinois, and Derek worked in the family business. Why did that matter? Dante took a slow sip of his drink. He explained that it mattered because it told him what kind of man Derek was. A man who earned his own power understood respect. A man who was given power believed he was entitled to it. Derek was the second kind. Those were the dangerous ones because they had never learned limits, never faced real consequences. They thought their family name and money could solve any problem. Maya asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the restaurant. She asked Dante why he was helping her. They barely knew each other. She was just his waitress. Why get involved in her mess? Dante stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights. For a long moment he was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer somehow, with an edge of old pain. He told her that a long time ago someone he cared about had been in a similar situation, a man who wouldn't accept no, who thought money and connections meant he could take whatever he wanted. Dante had been young then, without the power or resources to help. By the time he was in a position to do something, it was too late. He turned to face her, and Maya saw something raw in his expression before his careful mask slipped back into place. He told her he had sworn that would never happen again. If he saw someone being hunted, someone afraid, and he had the power to stop it, he would. No exceptions. No hesitation, Maya believed him. Maybe she was being naive. Maybe she was jumping from one dangerous situation into another. But sitting in that expensive office watching this powerful man who had stepped between her and her nightmare without even knowing her name, she believed that he meant what he said. Dante moved back to his chair and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression serious. He told her they needed to discuss what happened next. Derek now knew where she worked. He would be back, probably with police or lawyers claiming she owed him money or stole something, manufacturing some excuse to force her to deal with him. The restraining order from Chicago wasn't valid in New York, and getting a new one would take time Derek wouldn't give her. Maya felt her brief moment of safety crumbling. She asked what she was supposed to do. She couldn't keep running forever. She had no money for lawyers. She was alone. Dante shook his head. She wasn't alone anymore. He told her he would handle Derek, but she needed to trust him and follow his instructions exactly. First, she wouldn't go back to her apartment tonight. It wasn't safe. Derek might already know where she lived. Dante would have someone collect her things and bring them here. Second, she wouldn't go back to the restaurant. He would handle things with Mr. Chen, make sure she got her final paycheck, give her a good reference for future employment. Maya started to protest. She needed that job. She needed to support herself. She wasn't a charity case. But Dante interrupted her. He told her he wasn't offering charity. He was offering a solution. He owned several restaurants and businesses that needed good employees. He had watched her work for months, seen how she handled difficult customers, how she managed the dinner rush, how she treated people with kindness even when she was exhausted. He could use someone like her in one of his legitimate operations. A restaurant in Brooklyn that needed a manager. Better pay, better hours, and most importantly, a place Derek Mitchell would never think to look. It was too much, too fast. Maya's head was spinning. She had gone from dropping a tray to sitting in a penthouse office being offered a new job by a man who was almost certainly a crime boss, all in under an hour. It felt surreal, like she was watching her life happen to someone else. She asked Dante what he wanted in return, because in her experience, powerful men didn't help young women out of kindness. There was always a price, always an expectation. Derek had taught her that lesson well. Dante told Maya she was smart to be suspicious. Trust shouldn't come easy, especially after what she had been through. He respected her caution. But he also told her to consider her alternatives. She could leave right now, go back to her apartment, hope Derek didn't find her there tonight. She could quit the restaurant, find a new job, change her name again, run to another city, or she could accept help from someone who actually had the power to make Derek disappear from her life permanently. The way he said disappear sent a chill down Maya's spine. She asked him what exactly he meant by that. Was he going to hurt Derek, kill him? Because no matter how terrified she was, she didn't want blood on her hands. She didn't want to be responsible for someone's death, even someone like Derek. Dante's expression softened slightly. He assured her that he wasn't planning to kill anyone. Violence, he explained, was messy and drew attention from authorities. It was inefficient and unnecessary. There were better ways to handle men like Derek Mitchell. Legal ways, business ways, ways that would make Derek understand that pursuing Maya was the worst decision he could possibly make. Before Maya could ask what he meant, there was a knock at the office door. Dante called for whoever it was to enter, and a woman walked in. She was in her 30s, dressed in an elegant business suit, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a leather folder and moved with the confident efficiency of someone important. Dante introduced her as Maria Castillo, his attorney and business manager. Maria's eyes swept over Maya, taking in her stained uniform and shaken appearance, but her expression remained professionally neutral. She nodded politely to Maya before turning to Dante. She informed him that she had already gathered preliminary information on Derek Mitchell. His father owned 17 car dealerships across Illinois, with a net worth of approximately $40 million. Derek himself was vice president of marketing, though from what Maria could tell, it was mostly a title without real responsibility. He had a history of minor legal troubles, 2 DUIs, 3 assault charges that were settled out of court, and 5 restraining orders filed against him by various women over the past 7 years. All of them had been dropped or expired. Maya's stomach twisted. 5 other women. Derek had done this to 5 other women before her, and his family's money had made it all go away every time. She had thought she was special somehow, that maybe she had brought out the worst in him, but she was just the latest in a long line of women he had terrorized. Dante thanked Maria and asked her to prepare a comprehensive file on Derek, including financial records, business dealings, property holdings, and any legal vulnerabilities. Maria made notes on her tablet and confirmed she would have everything ready by morning. Before she left, she turned to Maya and told her there was a guest suite down the hall where she could stay tonight, with clothes that should fit and toiletries she might need. Her tone was kind, understanding. This clearly wasn't the first time she had dealt with situations like this. After Maria left, Dante explained his plan. Over the next few days, his people would investigate every aspect of Derek's life. They would find pressure points, leverage, things Derek cared about more than his obsession with Maya. Everyone had something they were afraid of losing. For Derek, it might be his position in his father's company, his trust fund, his social standing, or something else entirely. Once they identified what mattered most to him, they would make it clear that continuing to pursue Maya would cost him everything. Maya listened, torn between relief and disbelief. It sounded too good to be true, too easy. She pointed out that Derek's family had money and lawyers. They had protected him from consequences his entire life. What made Dante think they could control him when the entire Chicago legal system had failed? Dante's smile was cold, predatory. He told her the legal system had rules, procedures, bureaucracy. Those things created loopholes that men like Derek learned to exploit. But Dante didn't operate within the same system. He operated in the spaces between laws, In the world of business pressure and social consequences and unspoken understandings between powerful people. Derek's family might have money, but Dante had connections that stretched across multiple cities and industries. A few phone calls to the right people, and Derek's father could find his dealerships facing unexpected inspections, his loans being called in, his business partnerships dissolving. Maya asked if that was legal. Dante shrugged and told her that everything he did existed in a gray area. None of it was technically illegal, but all of it was effective. He had spent 20 years building a network of relationships with people who owed him favors, people who respected his power, people who knew better than to refuse when Dante Romano asked for something. That network was now hers to use. It should have scared her. Maybe it did scare her a little, but it also made her feel something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Protected. For the first time since Derek had shown his true nature, Maya felt like someone was actually on her side. Someone with the power to do more than just file paperwork and issue warnings that would be ignored. Dante stood and gestured toward the door. He told her Maria would show her to the guest suite and that she should try to get some rest. In the morning, they would discuss the job opportunity at the Brooklyn restaurant and start implementing the plan to deal with Derek. He promised her that by the end of next week, Derek Mitchell would never bother her again. Maya stood too, her legs still a bit shaky. She thanked Dante, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't know how to express what it meant to have someone believe her, to have someone take her fear seriously, to have someone with actual power say they would help. Most people had treated her like she was overreacting, like she should just ignore Derek and he would go away eventually. Only other survivors of stalking really understood that it didn't work that way. Dante walked her to the door and for a moment they stood close together. Maya could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle. She found herself looking up at him, really seeing him for the first time now that the panic had faded. He had a strong face, handsome in a rough way, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor indicated. There was something solid about him, reliable. It was strange to feel that way about a man who was probably a criminal. But Maya had learned that morality wasn't always black and white. She asked him one more. Dante looked at her for a long moment, and Maya forced herself to meet his gaze, to not look away even though her instinct was to avoid eye contact with someone so intense. Finally, he told her he wanted nothing. No dates, no favors, no debt to be repaid later. He was doing this because it was the right thing to do and because he could. The only thing he asked was that she trust him enough to let him fix this problem. Maya wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But 2 years with Derek had taught her to be suspicious of every kindness, to question every generous offer. Her skepticism must have shown on her face because Dante did something unexpected. He smiled, just a slight curve of his mouth, but it transformed his entire face, making him look younger, more human. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains when Maya woke. For a confused moment, she didn't recognize where she was. The bed was too soft, the room too large, the sheets too expensive. Then everything from the previous night came rushing back and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. A glance at the bedside clock showed it was almost 9 in the morning. Maya couldn't remember the last time she had slept so late. Working restaurant hours meant early mornings and late nights, and her anxiety about Derek had kept her sleep light and restless for months. But last night she had slept deeply, dreamlessly, completely. There was a gentle knock at the door. Maya called out to ask who it was, and Maria's voice responded from the other side. Maya wrapped herself in the plush robe hanging in the closet and opened the door. Maria stood there with a tray containing coffee, fresh pastries, fruit, and orange juice. She smiled warmly and told Maya that Dante thought she might be hungry, and that breakfast meetings went better on a full stomach. Maya accepted the tray gratefully, suddenly aware that she hadn't eaten since her shift started yesterday afternoon. She asked Maria if Derek was still outside. Maria's expression became more serious as she explained that Derek had finally left around 4 in the morning, but not before making quite a scene. He had called the police, claiming Maya had been kidnapped. The officers who responded had checked with building security, reviewed footage showing Maya entering the building willingly, and informed Derek that there was no kidnapping. He had argued, threatened to call his lawyers, and eventually left when the police threatened to arrest him for making a false report. Maya felt a mixture of relief and dread. Derek had left, but he had also escalated, calling the police, making accusations. These were new tactics. He was getting desperate, which made him more dangerous. Maria seemed to read her thoughts and assured her that Dante had anticipated this response. Everything was being documented. Every call Derek made, every threat he issued. They were building a comprehensive file that would demonstrate a pattern of harassment and obsession. After Maria left, Maya ate quickly and then examined the clothes in the closet. She chose a simple outfit, black pants and a soft blue sweater, both of which fit surprisingly well. When she emerged from the guest suite, Maria was waiting to escort her back to Dante's office. The office looked different in daylight. The city view was even more spectacular, and Maya could see the morning traffic flowing through Manhattan streets far below. Dante was already at his desk reviewing papers, but he looked up when she entered and gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs across from him. He was dressed in another expensive suit, this one charcoal gray, and he looked like he had been awake for hours despite the late night. On the desk between them was a thick folder. Dante slid it across to her and explained that it contained everything his people had gathered on Derek Mitchell overnight. Maya opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photos, financial records, police reports, court documents, and statements from the 5 other women Derek had stalked. The documentation was thorough, professional, and damning. One photo in particular caught Maya's attention. It showed Derek at what looked like a strip club, his arm around a woman who clearly wasn't happy to be there, his other hand holding a drink. The date stamp was from 3 weeks ago. Maya felt a strange mixture of emotions. She had spent 6 months looking over her shoulder, thinking Derek was consumed with finding her, and he had been out partying, moving on with his life while still occasionally sending her threatening messages. Dante explained that the photo was relevant because Derek's father, Richard Mitchell, was a prominent member of a conservative church and positioned himself as a family values businessman. The elder Mitchell's public image was built on being a devoted husband, Christian philanthropist, and upstanding community member. The truth, as Dante's people had discovered, was more complicated. Richard Mitchell had his own secrets, including a mistress in Milwaukee and some questionable accounting practices. In several of his dealerships, Maya asked what any of this had to do with stopping Derek. Dante leaned back in his chair and explained the strategy. They had 2 approaches. The direct approach would be to confront Derek with evidence of his stalking pattern, threaten to expose it publicly, and make it clear that continuing to pursue Maya would result in serious social and professional consequences. However, Dante believed the indirect approach would be more effective. The indirect approach targeted Derek's father. Richard Mitchell cared deeply about his reputation and his business empire. If he learned that his son's behavior was threatening both, he would take action. Dante's people would approach Richard through intermediaries, business associates who owed Dante favors. They would present evidence of Derek's pattern of harassment and explain how this liability could affect the family business. They would also hint at Richard's own vulnerabilities, making it clear that a public scandal involving Derek would invite scrutiny that Richard couldn't afford. Maya processed this information slowly. It was manipulative, calculated, and surprisingly nonviolent. She had expected Dante to threaten Derek directly, maybe even hurt him. Instead, he was planning to use social pressure and business consequences to make Derek stop. It was almost civilized if you ignored the underlying threat. She asked Dante what would happen to the 5 other women Derek had stalked. Did they know someone was finally holding him accountable? Dante's expression softened slightly. He told her that Maria had already reached out to 3 of them through intermediaries. 2 had agreed to provide statements about Derek's behavior. The 3rd had declined, too traumatized to revisit that part of her life. The other 2 women hadn't been located yet, but they were working on it. All the statements would be included in the file presented to Richard Mitchell. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Those women had tried to stop Derek through legal channels and failed, just like she had. Now, years later, their experiences might finally matter. Their truth might finally be heard. She asked Dante if there was a way to let them know she was grateful, that their bravery was helping her. Dante made a note on his pad and promised that Maria would pass along the message. Then he changed the subject to the job opportunity he had mentioned last night. He explained that he owned a restaurant in Brooklyn called Lucia's, named after his mother. It was an upscale Italian place that had been struggling with management issues. The current manager was retiring, and Dante needed someone reliable, someone who understood customer service and could handle the pressures of a busy restaurant. The job paid significantly more than Maya was making at Romano's. It included health insurance, which she hadn't had in years. The hours were better, mostly evenings but with Sundays off. Most importantly, it was in a different borough, in a neighborhood where Derek would never think to look for her. Dante would also provide an apartment above the restaurant, small but comfortable, rent-free for the first 6 months while she got established. It was an incredibly generous offer. Too generous. Maya's suspicious nature, honed by 2 years of Derek's manipulations, kicked in. She asked Dante directly what he would expect from her in return for this opportunity. She needed to know if there were strings attached, if this was the beginning of a different kind of trap. Dante's answer was immediate and firm. He expected her to run Lucia's successfully, to treat his employees fairly, to maintain the quality his mother's name deserved. That was it. No personal relationship, no romantic involvement, no debt beyond the professional obligation to do her job well. He understood her suspicion and respected it. He told her that if she preferred, Maria could draft a formal employment contract that specified exactly what was expected and what wasn't. Maya believed him. Maybe she was being naive again, but something in his directness, his willingness to put everything in writing, felt trustworthy. She accepted the position. Dante smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face, and told her she had made a good choice. He buzzed Maria to prepare the employment paperwork. While they waited, Dante asked Maya about her background. Where did she grow up? How did she end up in Chicago? Did she have family she was close to? It felt strange to be having a normal conversation with a man who was probably a crime boss, but Maya found herself relaxing and talking freely. She told him about growing up in Texas, about her mother who died when she was 16, about her older brother who was in the military and stationed overseas. She explained that she had come to Chicago for college, working her way through community college as a server, and had stayed for a job opportunity that fell through. Dante listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions. He told her a bit about his own background. His parents had immigrated from Italy. His father had worked in construction. His mother had cleaned houses to make ends meet. They had both died years ago, but Lucia's restaurant was Dante's way of honoring his mother's memory. She had been an incredible cook, teaching Dante and his sister family recipes and instilling in them a respect for tradition and family. The conversation was interrupted by Maria returning with the employment contract. Maya read through it carefully, surprised by how straightforward it was. Everything Dante had promised was there in clear language with no high. Maya felt her breath catch. The meeting was happening so fast. She had expected this process to take weeks, maybe months. But Dante moved quickly, with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly how to apply pressure and when. She asked if she needed to be at the meeting, dreading the answer but knowing she had to face this situation. Dante shook his head firmly. He told her this meeting was between him and Richard Mitchell, businessman to businessman. Derek would not be there, and neither would she. Bringing her into it would give Richard the opportunity to dismiss her claims as emotional or fabricated. Instead, Dante would present the facts coldly and objectively, framing this as a business problem that required a business solution. Richard Mitchell understood business. He understood risk management and protecting assets. Dante would speak his language. The next day crawled by for Maya. She threw herself into work at Lucia's, familiarizing herself with every aspect of the restaurant's operations. The staff was warming to her gradually, especially after she rolled up her sleeves during the lunch rush and helped serve tables when they got slammed with an unexpected crowd. Chef G nodded approvingly when he saw her treating the serving staff with respect and jumping in wherever she was needed. But underneath her professional focus, anxiety churned. Everything hinged on this meeting between Dante and Richard Mitchell. If it went well, Derek would be forced to back off. If it went poorly, she might be right back where she started, looking over her shoulder, planning her next escape. Dante had told her the meeting was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon at a private club in Midtown Manhattan. By 2, Maya was checking her phone every few minutes. By 3:30, she was pacing in her small upstairs apartment, unable to focus on anything else. She had given the assistant manager instructions to handle the early dinner prep and retreated upstairs to wait. At 4:15, her phone finally rang. It was Dante. His voice was calm and measured as he told her the meeting had gone as expected. Richard Mitchell had initially been defensive and tried to minimize Derek's behavior as youthful passion. But when Dante had laid out the evidence methodically, including statements from the other victims, police reports showing a pattern of escalation, and photos documenting Derek's recent activities that contradicted his claims of being consumed with love, Richard's demeanor had changed. The turning point came when Dante had shifted from discussing Derek's behavior to discussing the potential business implications. Dante had explained that he was currently in a position to either pursue this matter quietly or publicly. The quiet option involved Derek leaving Maya alone permanently, seeking professional help for his obsessive behavior, and possibly making restitution to his previous victims. The public option would involve bringing media attention to Derek's pattern of stalking, which would inevitably lead to questions about how his family and their business had enabled his behavior. Richard Mitchell was a practical man who had built his business through careful management of his public image. The thought of that image being shattered by his son's actions was unacceptable. He had asked Dante what guarantees he wanted. Dante's answer had been simple. Derek would have no contact with Maya, direct or indirect, ever again. Derek would enter a residential treatment program for behavioral issues, minimum 6 months. Derek would also compensate his previous victims for their suffering, amounts to be negotiated through Maria with each woman individually. In return, Dante would ensure the information he had gathered remained private. There would be no public exposure, no media leaks, no business consequences for the Mitchell family enterprises. Richard had agreed to all terms. Papers were being drawn up by both sides' attorneys. Derek was being informed of the agreement by his father tonight. Maya felt like she could breathe properly for the first time in 2 years. She asked Dante if he really thought Derek would honor the agreement. Men like Derek didn't handle being told what to do very well. What if he lashed out? What if he came after her anyway? Dante's response was calm, but carried an edge that reminded Maya exactly who she was dealing with. He explained that Richard Mitchell now understood that his son's behavior threatened everything he had built. Richard had already begun the process of having Derek removed from any meaningful position in the family business and was exploring options for a conservatorship that would give Richard control over Derek's trust fund. Derek would comply because his father would leave him no choice. And if Derek did try to violate the agreement, he would find that Dante's patience had limits. That evening, Maya stood at the window of her apartment, looking out at the Brooklyn street below. The dinner rush at Lucia's was in full swing, and she could hear the muffled sounds of the busy restaurant beneath her. For the first time in so long, she felt something like peace. Not complete peace, not yet, because part of her was still waiting for the other shoe to drop, still expecting Derek to appear suddenly. But it was progress. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. For a moment, panic seized her, thinking Derek had found her new number. But when she opened it, the message was from Maria. It contained a photo of signed legal documents, the agreement between Richard Mitchell and Dante Romano. It was real. It was done. Maya saved the photo and then, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she cried tears of relief instead of fear. Over the next week, Maya settled into her new life with cautious optimism. She developed systems for managing Lucia's operations, earning the grudging respect of Chef G and the genuine affection of most of the staff. The restaurant ran more smoothly with clear communication and organized scheduling. Dante stopped by several times, always professional, always asking how things were going, never overstepping the boundaries he had established. Maria kept Maya updated on Derek's situation. He had entered a treatment facility in upstate New York, a private institution that specialized in behavioral disorders. Richard Mitchell had indeed taken control of Derek's finances, limiting his access to funds and making it clear that his future in the family business depended on completing treatment and maintaining good behavior. The compensation for Derek's previous victims was being processed, with 3 of the 5 women accepting the settlements. Maya received a letter, delivered through Maria, from one of those women. She had written to thank Maya for being brave enough to let someone help her, something the other woman had been too afraid to do. She wrote that she hoped Maya's life would be everything she deserved, free from fear. Maya kept that letter in her apartment, a reminder that her suffering hadn't been for nothing, that by letting Dante help her, she had helped others find closure too. A month passed. Then, too, the constant vigilance Maya had lived with for so long began to ease. She stopped checking over her shoulder every few minutes. She started accepting shifts that ended late at night without worrying about walking to her apartment. She made friends among the staff at Lucia's. She even started dating casually, testing her ability to trust again in small, careful steps. Dante remained a steady presence in the background of her new life. He came to Lucia's weekly, usually on Thursday evenings, and Maya would join him for a drink after the dinner service ended. They talked about the restaurant, about business, about life. Sometimes Maya caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something warm but carefully controlled. She wondered sometimes if there could ever be something more between them. But she also understood that he was intentionally keeping that distance for her sake, letting her heal without any pressure or complications. One Thursday evening, 3 months after the night her life had changed, Maya sat across from Dante in the now empty dining room of Lucia's. The last customers had left, the staff had finished cleaning, and it was just the two of them with glasses of wine and the comfortable silence of people who had been through something intense together. Dante asked her how she was really doing. Not professionally, not day to day, but deep down. Maya considered the question seriously before answering. She told him she was getting better. The nightmares had mostly stopped. She could go whole days without thinking about Derek. She was building a life instead of just surviving. She felt like herself again, or maybe like a new version of herself, one who was stronger for what she had endured. She thanked Dante again for everything he had done. He waved off her thanks as he always did, but Maya persisted. She told him that he had saved her life, truly saved it, in a way the legal system never could have. She asked him if he saved people often, if she was one of many projects. Dante was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. Finally, he told her she wasn't a project. He helped when he could, when the situation called for it, but he didn't make a habit of getting personally involved. Something about her situation, about her, had compelled him to act. Maybe it was the memory of his sister. Maybe it was recognizing in Maya the same stubborn strength his sister had shown. Or maybe, and here he paused, meeting her eyes directly, maybe it was just her. The air between them shifted, charged with possibility. Maya felt her heart beat faster. She had wondered if she was imagining the connection between them, the way conversations sometimes stretched longer than necessary, the way his face softened when... 6 months after that fateful Friday night, Maya stood in Lucia's kitchen reviewing the evening's reservations with Chef G. The restaurant had thrived under her management, earning positive reviews in several food blogs and even a mention in a major newspaper's dining section. She had implemented new systems, trained the staff in excellent customer service, and worked closely with Chef G to refine the menu. The restaurant was consistently booked weeks in advance now. More importantly, Maya had thrived. The haunted look that used to shadow her eyes had disappeared. She smiled easily now, laughed often, and moved through the world with confidence instead of fear. She had reconnected with her brother during his leave from military service, finally able to tell him the truth about why she had fled Chicago. He had wanted to fly to New York immediately to confront Derek, but she had assured him it was handled, that she was safe now. The pride in his voice when she told him about managing Lucia's had made her cry happy tears. Her relationship with Dante had evolved slowly, carefully, exactly as she needed it to. They still had their Thursday evening conversations, but they had also started spending time together outside the restaurant. Coffee on Sunday mornings, walks through Central Park, a trip to an art museum where Dante surprised her with his knowledge of Renaissance painters. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give, content to let their relationship develop at her pace. Maya was beginning to understand that what she felt for Dante was real and separate from the gratitude she would always have for his intervention. She liked his dry sense of humor, the way he listened when she talked about her day, how he consulted her opinion on business decisions. She felt safe with him, but it was a different kind of safety than before. It wasn't about him protecting her from external threats. It was about trusting him with her heart. A delivery arrived that afternoon, a large bouquet of flowers addressed to Maya. Her first instinct was panic, the old fear that Derek had found a way to reach her. But when she opened the card, it was from Dante. The message was simple. 6 months of freedom deserved to be celebrated. The flowers were beautiful, cheerful yellow roses and white lilies. Nothing too romantic, just thoughtful and kind. Maria called that afternoon with news. Derek had completed his treatment program and had been released, but he was remaining in upstate New York under strict supervision by his father. The treatment center's report indicated he had made significant progress understanding his controlling behaviors and obsessive patterns. More importantly, Richard Mitchell had made it clear to his son that any attempt to contact Maya or violate their agreement would result in permanent disinheritance, and Dante being informed immediately. Maya asked how she should feel about that information. Part of her wanted to believe Derek had genuinely changed, had recognized the harm he caused and was working to be better. But another part of her, the part that had lived through 2 years of his escalating obsession, knew that people like Derek rarely changed fundamentally. They just got better at hiding their true nature. Maria's response was practical. It didn't matter if Derek had changed or not. What mattered was that he had powerful motivations to stay away from Maya, and Dante's network would continue monitoring him. If Derek slipped, they would know immediately. Maya could live her life without worrying about him because other people were doing that worrying for her. That evening's dinner service was particularly busy. A private party had booked half the restaurant for a birthday celebration, and the other half was filled with regular customers and walk-ins. Maya moved through the dining room with practiced ease, checking on tables, solving small problems before they became big ones, ensuring everyone had a perfect experience. This was what she was good at, what she loved doing. Creating spaces where people felt welcome and cared for. Dante arrived during the peak of the rush, not to his usual corner table but to the bar where he could watch Maya work without disrupting service. She caught his eye once and smiled, feeling warm at his presence. When the rush finally subsided and the private party left, Maya joined him at the bar. The bartender, a young man named Marcus who had become one of her closest friends on staff, poured her a glass of wine without being asked, and tactfully moved to the other end of the bar to give them privacy. Dante told her she was remarkable to watch, the way she managed chaos and made it look effortless. Maya laughed and told him it was definitely not effortless, but she loved it anyway. They fell into easy conversation about the restaurant, about a new business venture Dante was considering, about a book Maya was reading. It was comfortable, natural, the kind of conversation that happened between people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Then Dante's expression became more serious. He told her he had something to discuss with her, something important. Maya felt a flutter of nervousness, unsure where this was heading. Dante explained that he had been thinking about their relationship, about the care he had taken to not pressure her, to give her time and space to heal. He appreciated that healing process and would never want to rush it. But he also needed to be honest about his feelings. He told her that he had fallen in love with her. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually over these past months of conversations and coffee dates and watching her build a new life. He loved her strength, her kindness, her dedication to doing things right. He loved how she treated his restaurant staff like family, how she took pride in her work, how she had faced her trauma and come out stronger. He loved the sound of her laugh and the way she argued with him about the best way to make marinara sauce and how she always remembered exactly how he took his coffee. Maya felt tears welling up, but they were good tears. She had known her feelings for Dante had deepened, but hearing him articulate his feelings made everything real. She told him she loved him too, that she had been afraid to admit it even to herself because she worried her judgment was still clouded by everything he had done for her. But the truth was, she loved him for who he was, not just for what he had done. She loved his integrity, his dry humor, the gentleness he showed despite his dangerous profession. She loved how he had given her space to heal, while making it clear he would be there when she was ready. Dante reached across the bar and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. He asked if she was ready, really ready to see where this could go between them. Maya didn't hesitate. She was ready. She had done the work to heal, to understand herself, to separate gratitude from genuine feeling. What she felt for Dante was real, and she was ready to explore it without fear or reservation. Their first real kiss happened right there at the bar of Lucia's, with Marcus pretending very hard not to notice and Chef G calling out from the kitchen, asking if someone could please help him because he wasn't running a romance novel back there. They both laughed against each other's lips, the tension of months of careful restraint finally releasing. Over the following months, their relationship deepened. Maya moved from the studio apartment above Lucia's to Dante's penthouse, though. She kept the studio for nights when she worked late and didn't want to make the trip to Manhattan. She met more of Dante's organization, understanding gradually the full scope of his business, both legitimate and otherwise. It should have frightened her, but she found that Dante's world operated by codes and rules she could understand. Loyalty was paramount. Family, both blood and chosen, was protected fiercely. Respect was earned and given. She also learned more about his sister, Isabella, seeing photos of a beautiful young woman with Dante's dark eyes and warm smile. Dante talked about her more, freely now, sharing memories and grief he had kept locked away for years. Maya understood that by healing from her own trauma, she had somehow helped him begin to heal from his. The anniversary of the night Maya's life changed arrived on a Friday, naturally. Dante had made reservations at an exclusive restaurant, but Maya asked if they could do something different. She wanted to go back to Romano's, the place where everything had started. Dante looked surprised but agreed. He made a call, and somehow Mr. Chen was happy to welcome them that evening. Walking back into Romano's felt surreal. Maya remembered the fear, the desperation the moment she dropped her tray and thought her life was over. Now a year later she walked in holding Dante's hand, confident and free. Mr. Chen greeted them warmly, asking how Maya was doing, congratulating her on her success at Lucia's. He seated them at the same corner booth where Dante used to sit alone on Friday nights. As they ate dinner, Maya reflected on everything that had changed. A year ago she had been running, terrified, trapped by Derek's obsession and her own powerlessness. Now she managed a successful restaurant, lived with a man she loved who loved her in return, and faced each day without fear. Derek was a distant memory, a chapter of her life that was closed and sealed. Dante asked her what she was thinking about. Maya told him she was thinking about how strange fate was. If Derek hadn't found her that night, if she hadn't dropped that tray, if Dante hadn't been sitting in his usual booth, her entire life would be different, probably worse, definitely more frightening. But because of a series of coincidences or destiny or whatever you wanted to call it, she had found safety and love and a future worth looking forward.